Welcome to our 7th installment of Masters in 504 Lending. I'll be covering affiliation. I don't know that I am any sort of expert like Judd mentioned. I think I just drew the short end of the stick with today's presentation, because affiliation can get quite complex and quite boring. So I'll do my best. We've stuck a couple of things in the presentation to spice it up a little bit. And I'm seeing on the chat that it sounds like you guys can hear me, so appreciate that. Let me share my screen here. Okay. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of working with, as mentioned, my name is Jeff Bancheri. I live and work in St. George, Utah, and cover Southern Utah, Northern Arizona, Vegas and Mesquite, and anywhere else you want to do a deal, I can do it. So there's my contact information. If you do have complex questions regarding affiliation after the presentation, feel free to contact any of our other loan officers and they will walk you through the complex questions. Just kidding, I'll take your questions. We are going to get into the weeds today, into some in-depth affiliation stuff, just to give you a flavor of what we look at and ultimately what the SBA looks at when it comes to affiliation. But I don't want you to get too bogged down with those details. Really, there's 3 key takeaways that I want you to walk away from today's presentation with. Excuse me. And those are: first, you don't need to be an affiliation expert. All of the stuff that we're going to get into today is really just to give you an idea of what we look at. The main thing you need to know is that we're here and our job is to be the affiliation experts. So if you do have a concern, if you think your borrower might be too big, if you think there's a franchise agreement or a management agreement issue, get the deal to us early and let us kind of make that affiliation determination. Second point, most businesses are not too big. In my 10-year career, I think maybe 2 or 3 times have I had to turn down a deal due to the borrower exceeding the size standard. So most of the time we can make it work. And then lastly, if we ask for it, it's because we need it. You know, when we send out a needs list and we include 3 years of affiliate tax returns, the most common pushback and the most common question we get is, well, why do you need those tax returns for these affiliates? It has nothing to do with the loan, has nothing to do with what we're doing. And justifiably, that's an understandable response. But if your borrower wants SBA financing, it's just part of the process. So again, if we ask for it, it's because we need it, and we can save time and energy by just tracking down those affiliate financials rather than fighting it. So these are the 3 takeaways I want you to come away with. But with that said, let's get into it. First of all, the most common question we field in regard to affiliation is, how do you calculate the 504 size standard? So let me just kind of walk you through that. There's 2 things that we look at. First is the applicant's net worth. And when we're talking about the applicant, we're talking about the operating company, the real estate holding company or EPC, and then all affiliates. So we look at the financials of all those entities, and on an aggregate basis, all the affiliates must have a tangible net worth, and tangible is the key word there, tangible net worth of 15 million or less at the time of application. Okay, and then the other thing we look at is the applicant's revenue. So again, we take the operating company, the EPC, and any affiliates, and the 2-year average net profit after tax must be 5 million or less at the time of application. Here's an example of a recent loan that I worked on. This is an 18 affiliate banger, we're going to call this one. So as you can see, we've got the primary operating company, had a co-operating company, the EPC, and then various affiliates. So we had 18 entities we were looking at. And in our loan software, basically what we do is we take the net profit from 2 years ago from each entity and aggregate it. We take the net profit from the most recent year and we aggregate it. And then the number that we're looking at is the average of those last 2 years. So you can see in yellow, the highlighted, the average net profit after tax for this applicant, when we look at all the affiliates combined, was $4,087,000. So we're under that $5 million mark in terms of revenue. And then the same thing, what we do in that tangible net worth column, we take the tangible net worth of all the applicants and aggregate it. So this one was $13,649,000. So again, under that $15 million limit. So this applicant was fine. It did not exceed the size standard. You'll notice some of the lines there are blank. Those were either disregarded entities or their financials were captured in some of the other entities. But the point is, this is kind of the exercise we go through to determine size standard. So you can see with some of these more complicated, more complex, with a lot of affiliates, that it does take time to collect tax returns on all of these entities, to determine which ones are actually affiliates, and then to do the size standard calculation. But this gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how we determine that. Now, why do we care about affiliation? So there's several reasons we care. Ultimately, if it doesn't meet the size standard, or if there's a management agreement where that management company exerts too much control, the loan's ineligible. So that's the main reason we care. We want to make sure that it's eligible. Like I talked about, we look at the size standards to make sure that it's under those two net worth and net profit after tax numbers. Maximum borrowing amount, that third point there. We do have to look at the applicant plus all affiliates and determine and make sure that their outstanding SBA borrowings are under $5 million. Control. So one thing we look at is if there is a management company or a franchisor, do those entities, do those franchisors have undue control over the small business applicant? In other words, can they determine how money is spent? Can they determine who the applicant hires and fires? Things like that. And then lastly, we look at affiliates from a credit standpoint. Are there affiliate businesses that are draining cash flow, that are losing money, that could negatively impact the applicant? So those are several reasons why we care about affiliation. Also want to define the term associate. There is a difference between an associate and an affiliate. So an associate of a small business, as you can see, is an officer, director, owner of more than 20% of equity or key employee of a small business, any entity in which one or more individuals above owns or controls at least 20%, and any individual or entity in control of or controlled by small business. So there may be a person or an entity that is an associate, but not necessarily an affiliate. And why do we care about that? If that associate has prior arrests or convictions, if they're going to offer a personal guarantee, or if that associate has prior loss to the government, that could all affect our loan application and what we're doing. Couple misconceptions here. Most lenders that we work with, they kind of approach the issue of affiliation by determining owners of 20% or more of the applicant, and then assuming that all other businesses owned by those individuals is an affiliate. And that's not always the case. We'll get into that a little bit more. Affiliation is about control or power to control, either through ownership or through key management. And this is a hot button issue right now with SLPC, that stands for the Sacramento Loan Processing Center, essentially SBA. So affiliation is a hot button issue with the SBA. Okay, so control, what we're looking for. Affiliation exists when one individual or entity controls or has the power to control another, or a third party controls or has the power to control both. And the key here, it doesn't matter whether power or control is exercised, as long as that power or control exists, it must be counted as an affiliate. So the factors considered, as you can see here: ownership, stock options, management, identity of interest, franchise, and license agreements. And we'll touch on each one of these. So affiliation based on ownership. This is the first place we go. So any business in which our applicant has more than 50% voting control. In other words, if they've got 50% ownership or more in another entity, that entity would be considered an affiliate. Or if they have 50% voting control. So they might have 5% ownership, but they might be the CEO or they might be the president. If they have the ability to control the company's decisions, that company is an affiliate. Okay, stock options. Assumed to have present effect. So let's say this is a scenario in which somebody has 5% ownership in a business, but they have the option to purchase more stock and take more control up to 50%. That would be considered an affiliate, even if they haven't exercised that option. Truth is, I've never seen this. We never look at stock options. So wouldn't worry too much about that one. Management. So again, if you have a borrower and they are the president or CEO or decision maker in another entity, regardless of their ownership, that entity would be considered an affiliate. The other thing where management comes into play is if your borrower has a management company that's going to be running the operation. So this is often seen on hotels or storage units, where a third-party management company is going to manage the operation. We would want to get a look at that agreement to determine how much control that third-party management company has. If that third-party management company has the ability to hire and fire employees, if they have the ability to determine the company's budget and how money is spent, that would be an ineligible business, because ultimately the SBA wants the small business owner and the small business to have control over the entity that we're lending to. So things we look for on management agreements. Management company has sole discretion over business operations with minimal oversight and decision-making by the applicant business. So what we just talked about, if a third-party management company has too much control over the small business applicant, that presents a problem. To avoid affiliation, management agreement must include applicant business having meaningful oversight over management company's activities, including, so in other words, we want the small business applicant to be able to approve the annual budget, approve any capital expenditures, have control over the bank accounts, have oversight over the employees operating the business. So those are all key factors that we look for in a management agreement. For a non-PCLP CDC, in other words, if we're submitting the loan to SBA, we actually have to submit the management agreement to SBA. They have to review and approve that management agreement before we can submit the loan to SBA. That is not the case if we are submitting via PCLP, which we don't often do. Okay, so let's have a quick trivia break. I told you this stuff can get pretty dry and boring, so we'll break it up here with a little trivia. Let's say that the first person to correctly answer via chat will win a Mountain West drink koozie, as shown here by Judd, to keep your beverage nice and cool. Judd, I'll have you be the judge on the chat if you would. So here is the trivia question.
I got you.
Okay. Rap star Calvin Brodus Jr. is more commonly known by what name? Again, that is rap star Calvin Brodus Jr. is more commonly known by what name?
We have our first answer, which is 50 Cent.
Okay, incorrect. You can feel free to use Google, folks. What was that? Sorry, who did you say after 50 Cent?
Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg, that is correct. Who's our winner?
Kevin Stocking.
Kevin Stocking. We will arrange to get you a Mountain West koozie. We have a variety of colors. We also would have accepted Snoop Doggy Dogg or Snoop Lion. So good job, Kevin. I'd be curious to know if you used Google or not, or if you're just plugged into the rap scene. But all right, let's jump back into it. Affiliation based on identity of interest. This has actually become a real hot topic lately at the SBA, and we've run into some trouble with this issue of identity of interest. So I'm going to read this and just read along with me here. Affiliation arises when there is an identity of interest between close relatives with identical or substantially identical businesses or economic interests. Okay, so I'll give you a real life example here of what we've run into that's seemed to be on the SBA's radar lately. Let's take the example of hotels. Okay, we've probably all seen this where you have a hotel that's maybe owned 80% by one individual and 20% by another individual. We get the loan approved, everything's great. They then apply for a second SBA loan and they might flip that ownership. So the minority owner on the other property now has 80% interest, or we'll say 85% interest, and the majority owner on the other property now has 15% interest in the new property. Borrowers will often do this, obviously, to avoid having to guarantee on both loans or to avoid exceeding the maximum amount that they can borrow. But the SBA is really looking out for this. And so if you have close relatives who are operating similar businesses in the same geographic area, that would be considered affiliation based on identity of interest. And we would have to account for, in this case, both of the hotel businesses and all of their affiliates to determine size standard, to determine how much SBA borrowings they have left. So hopefully that illustration kind of clarifies what this identity of interest issue is. But it is a hot topic. It is something the SBA is looking out for. That second bullet point there, such as where the close relatives operate concerns in the same or similar industry in the same geographic area. A close relative is defined as a spouse, a parent, child, or a sibling, or a spouse of any such person. We do have the ability to rebut the determination if we can show evidence that the interests are separate. Okay. Let me see if there's anything. This kind of just goes along with what I just talked about. SBA presumes that affiliation arises between two firms that are controlled by close relatives. So SBA just makes that assumption. Sometimes they overstep. Sometimes they say, hey, these two people have the same last name. We don't know if they're related, but we think they are. And so we have to sometimes set SBA straight there. So some of the ways that we can rebut or respond to SBA and demonstrate that there is not identity of interest. We can demonstrate that at least one of the family members does not control his or her respective firm. We would do that by organizational documents showing their minority ownership and showing that they don't have any management ability. We can establish an estrangement between close family members. So I guess if two brothers are in a fight, they don't talk, their businesses really and truly do have nothing to do with each other. If we can establish that, we can show that there's not an identity of interest. If the businesses are not in the same line of work or in the same geographic location. And then lastly, we can establish a clear line of fracture between the businesses. We can show that they don't conduct business with each other, or that they don't share personnel, office space, or back office functions. Again, I realize we're getting into the weeds here. You'll be able to access this presentation on YouTube, I believe, so you can come back to these slides. But again, if there's questions, come to us. Lastly, affiliation based on franchise and license agreements. Generally, these do not create affiliation, provided the applicant has the right to profit from its efforts and bears the risk of loss commensurate with its ownership. Okay, so just keep in mind, generally, these do not create affiliation. Sometimes they do. Affiliation hot button issues. Disclose all potential affiliates and why they are not affiliated. So that's our job in our loan presentation, is to disclose all of the potential affiliates and discuss their affiliation or their non-affiliation. Sources of possible affiliates include schedules B, C, D, E, and F on the personal tax returns and the K-1s. Generally, for us, where we see them, it's going to be on the Schedule C. So if they have a sole proprietorship that they own, on the Schedule E, and on the Schedule F, that's where we see most of the affiliates. Personal financial statement. So oftentimes on their personal financial statement, the borrower will list affiliates. They'll list trusts, so be careful about undisclosed trusts. For all potential entities, we then determine control. So we first determine, okay, these are all the potential affiliates that this borrower has. And then we go through and we determine, does the borrower have 50% or more ownership in this entity, or does the borrower have the ability to control this entity because they're a key manager, a president, a CEO? And then we have to discuss that in our credit memo to determine whether or not they're an affiliate business. Again, it's crucial for us to disclose all affiliates in the CDC credit memo. As mentioned before, this is a hot button for SBA and for our audits, what we call the OCRM reviews. So I'll go back to my original slide here as we close out. Don't get too into the weeds with everything that we just talked about. Refer to YouTube or give us a call. You just need to know that we're here. We can dive into those issues and talk you through it. Again, most businesses are not too big. On occasion they are, most of the time they are not. And lastly, when we're collecting our package, if we ask for those affiliate financials, it's because we need them. Before we close out, if there's any questions on the chat, Judd, have you seen any questions come through or any further?
Can you hear me? Okay.
I can.
Nice. No questions on the chat. And everyone was very appreciative of your trivia questions. It made it a lot of fun.
Yeah, had to wake some people up. Yep.
Couldn't believe Affiliation came together so nicely. So just a lot of applauses that not everyone can see. So one quick thing, for our next Masters in 504 lending, ALP Express has been approved by SBA. That's where we can do deals 1.2 million or less. The project size SBA portion has to be 500,000 or less. We want to do a training on this, but the SBA is putting together a program guide. And so the official teaser is once we have the program guide, we're going to slip that into the next possible training. So we'll let you know. But if you can imagine any training getting better than Affiliation, it's going to be ALP Express. And again, ALP Express is a designation by SBA. Not every CDC has it. And for Mountain West, since we have ALP status, we can submit loans to the processing center that are these smaller deals, and they'll take 7 to 8 days to process instead of the 20 days it's taking on a regular 504. So if you have any of those smaller loans, we will submit it through the ALP Express since we have that status. And so far, we've had a handful go through, and it's taken about 7 to 8 days to be processed. So if you have any questions on that in the meantime, also let us know. Let's give a round of applause for Jeff. Thank you for taking the time to put together Affiliation and to make it so exciting.
Thanks, everybody. Join us for our next presentation, August 25th, 11 a.m. And the likely topic we'll dive into the ALP Express that Judd mentioned.
Thanks.